My name's Tasmin Little, and I am currently a solo concert violinist, but not for much longer. I had grown up in a very musical household. My father is an actor, and he was in a lot of West End shows such as Fiddler on the Roof and Oliver. When I got chicken pox, I remembered that some of my classmates were learning the recorder, and I thought perhaps that would be a fun thing to do. And so my mum bought me a recorder and a little book that showed you that if you put your thumb somewhere and your finger somewhere, it made that note, and that was what it looked like written down in the treble clef. Well, I got through that in half an hour, and my mum said, "What's wrong with your book?" And I said, "Nothing, it's brilliant, but can I have the next one? Because I've done that one now." I absolutely loved playing a musical instrument, and I thought when I was better, it might be fun to learn the piano, and we'd just been given a piano by a friend of the family. So I started some piano lessons, but really wanted to try the violin. And the only problem was that I was 6, and you weren't allowed, in my state primary school, you weren't allowed to start the violin until you were 8. And so my mother, not to be daunted by this, went to see the violin teacher, Mr. Watmo, and she said to him, "Mr. Watmo, my daughter's really musical, please would you consider teaching her?" And he was lovely and gave me an ear test. Well, actually what he really said at first was, "Mrs. Little, all mothers say that their daughters are musical." And my mum said, no, really, she taught herself the treble clef and to play the recorder in half an hour. So he gave me this ear test and said, "I'm happy to tell you, Mrs. Little, your daughter really is musical." And he agreed to move mountains so that I could begin lessons immediately. And I started off with 15 minutes a week, which meant that I had to miss out on 15 minutes of history. But as we were doing the dinosaurs at that point, I didn't really mind. And then I played in a school concert a few months later, and the council heard what great progress I'd made, and so they agreed to let me have half an hour. And then my teacher, Mr. Watmo, said to my mother that I'd made such good progress that soon he wouldn't have anything left to teach me, and I really ought to go to a specialist music school. And that was when I auditioned for the Yehudi Menuhin School, and I went there from the age of 8 until 18. One of the things about playing the violin is that the repertoire is absolutely huge, and it's very exciting, even though you know that you'll never get through it. And I know I will never play certain pieces of music now because I'll be stopping at the end of the year. But because the repertoire is so immense, it's full of such rich masterpieces. This has been a real driving force behind my wanting to not just stay at a certain high level, but get better and better. And I've always striven to play a wide repertoire, because I think that, first of all, it shows the violin in a very broad range. It's an instrument that is capable of sonority and lyricism, but it's also capable of virtuosity and real attack and verve. So I think that it's great if you can bring out all these different things in the violin, but obviously it calls for lots of different techniques that have to be honed and developed so that each of us as violinists become as good as we possibly can at, first of all, making the instrument speak and sing and communicate, but also bringing out what the instrument is capable of and what you would like to express through the music. So I think it's a combination of wanting very much to bring out my ideas and my thoughts on each piece of music, but also trying to get better and better and trying to stretch myself so that each performance that I give hopefully is at least as good, but trying to get better as well. quite interesting thinking about my career as I have been, because obviously I'm about to have a big change of life, as it were. And I've been thinking back on the progress that I've made and where I started and how I've got to where I've got. And well, it's been a bumpy ride. Nobody really has, or very few people have that sort of classic overnight success thing where that's it and you never have to worry again. I think any performer, and particularly any performer that wants to drive themselves to be the best they can, will continue to search and stretch and take risks. And of course, in taking risks, sometimes you fall flat on your face, and sometimes you fall flat on your face in a rather public manner as well. And yet I think it is very important to be bold. And perhaps one of the things, if I'd had an opportunity as my older self to go and chat to my younger self, in my early 20s, I think I was quite cautious about not rocking a boat, that if there was a conductor that wasn't helping me in my performance, and that happens less often these days because I think there's more sense of collaboration. But in my early days, a conductor was a bit like the doctor. He was to be listened to and potentially feared. So I didn't always have the courage to say, I don't agree with that, and I'm the person that's been practicing this piece for the last 3 months, so I'd like to incorporate more of my ideas, please. And I think if I were to go back, I might possibly have ended up having a few more arguments than I ever did, but possibly with more sense of my strength of purpose there. So I think I would have said to my young self, please be a little braver. You don't have to be rude, but say if something isn't working for you. Don't just go along with it. That's probably advice I would give to somebody at the start of the profession right now as well, and particularly under the current circumstances where not only is it very difficult to make your mark and there's a lot of competition out there in terms of other very fine players, but you have to have a very strong sense of self, and also in the current climate, and particularly with a virus floating around, you have to find different avenues to really show people who you are. And so I think it's important to focus on your strengths. And if you are a natural Brahms player rather than a natural Paganini player, focus on what you're good at. You don't have to be a jack of all trades. I mean, I've never played Paganini in my life because it's not my forte. I have very small hands. His writing demands great stretches of tense that just kill my hands. And so I recognized early on that not only was I not a good Paganini player, I wasn't actually interested enough in his music. So I just said to myself, I don't ever need to do this, and I never have. So I think it's very important that you recognize where your strengths are in the repertoire. And that's not to say that you don't keep on working away at other areas that need developing, but I think it's a constant question-answer process, an internal process where you go, all right, where am I at right now? Who am I musically right now? Who do I want to be? And how am I going to get there? I've been very fortunate in working with a huge array of amazing conductors: Simon Rattle, Gustavo Dudamel, Vernon Handley, Charles Groves. It's a long list, and everybody has given something to me musically. And so, I always think that is such an exciting thing when you work with a great musician, because you see part of their internal process and you can learn a lot from them. But also, great musicians can continue to be very humble. And I remember working with Sir Charles Mackerras, and we were recording the Delius double concertos, so violin and cello concerto, which is a piece that I've known for a very, very long time. Sir Charles was very straight. He didn't dress stuff up at all. He could be even bordering on rude at times, and particularly difficult if he felt that somebody wasn't pulling their weight. But if you'd done your prep and you were a good musician, he was absolutely lovely to work with. sitting down at dinner the night before we were going into the recording studio to play this piece, and I was talking about the second subject, the big tune that the violin and cello has. And Charles turned around and he said, "What are you talking about? It's not the violin and the cello that have the tune, it's the oboe." I said, "No, it's not." He said, "Yes, of course it is." I said, "Charles, when it comes back at the very end, where's the oboe? Nowhere in sight. Who's in sight? The violin and the cello." And he laughed and he said, "Do you know what? You're absolutely right." And, you know, he was a great, great, great musician with an incredible intellect. And he wasn't afraid to say, "Yeah, I was wrong and you were right," which, you know, I like. I think it's very important. As I said before, we all fall flat on our faces, and you just have to put your hand up and go, "I messed up, let me have another go." And there's no shame in that, because I think, you know, it's really important. It's a sign of an interesting musician that they don't just want to play it safe, they don't just practice something one way, they're flexible. In fact, the recordings that John and I have been doing so enjoyably, we've done things to camera that we've never done before. But I heard John have an idea and I loved it and ran with it. And, you know, I think that that's the best kind of performance. It's performance which is spontaneous. Spontaneous of a different nature was when I was working with Tasmin Little in the Aix-en-Provence festival. I was playing the Brahms violin concerto. The concerts took place outside, and unfortunately the Mistral wind had decided to make a great appearance that afternoon and evening. We were rehearsing in the afternoon, and poor Simon could hardly conduct because he was trying to keep the score on the stand. And he was spending more time doing that than, you know, engaging with the orchestra and trying to conduct me in the Brahms violin concerto. So, and also actually, the wind was going so strongly that at one point it was blowing my bow. So a passage that was supposed to be quite sort of long bows and lyrical, it sort of went quite staccato. It was quite funny. I mean, it wasn't very funny because it was a little bit worrying. But anyway, so we were laughing at the end of the rehearsal. Simon, who again, I mean, this is a mark of a very, very fine and thoughtful conductor, he said, "Tasmin, how would you feel if I ditched the score tonight? I know it from memory, but some soloists prefer to have a score there." I said, "Simon, neither you nor I can see the score at the moment. I think we're better off without it." I said, "I trust you implicitly. You know this piece backwards. So do I. Let's just do it." And indeed we did. And it was a terrific performance. It was one that I shall never forget. So this year has turned out rather differently from the way that I think probably all of us were expecting it to. I should have been hanging up my gowns in August, and with the pandemic I decided to delay my retirement until December, just in the hope that I would manage to fulfil some of the commitments that had been lost earlier in the year. Alongside the continuing performances until December, I'm doing a counselling and mentoring course because I'm very interested in this aspect. I'm interested in psychology. During lockdown did a short cognitive psychology course, and I want to hopefully refine these skills because I have taken on co-presidency of the Yehudi Menuhin School, my other president being Daniel Barenboim, and I want to try to help the young people at the school emerge from the school and feel supported as they take their first steps into college and then into their career. So I think it's really important to understand how one can help support young people, and that's very much a part of what I want to do. I'm also an ambassador for the musical charity Help Musicians UK. It used to be called the Musicians Benevolent Fund. And so no doubt I will be using my skills and my time and energy to try to help them, first of all, fundraise, and secondly, if people need advice and support. I will continue my association with the Royal Academy of Music. I've given masterclasses there for a long time, and I'm also going to be giving masterclasses at the college and at Guildhall and Trinity and up at Cheetham School of Music. A tiny bit of private teaching, a little bit of adjudication of competitions, some presenting of radio programmes. So BBC Radio 3 have commissioned me to make 3 programmes, and I'd like to do some more of that. I enjoy making programmes. I find it's very stimulating and I learn a lot, and hopefully can put some of that across to audiences. And then I think it's time to find some things outside of music. I've devoted my life to music. I think I'd like to explore other aspects of what I can do and what I can give. So that bit's a little unknown at this point in time, but I'm excited, and let's see what transpires.